4-3, solving quadratic equations by factoring. 4-3, solving quadratic equations by factoring. That's also our objective today. We want to solve equations by factoring. We do this by using the zero product property. It's a very important property we're going to use a lot today. What is that? Well, for any real numbers a, b, if a times b equals 0, then either a or b have to equal 0. Or both a and b equal 0. So for example, they give here, if you have x plus 3 times x minus 5 equals 0, then one of these two, at the very least, they equal 0. So do we solve that? We just split it up and solve each one separately. This only works for when it equals 0, because that means that if we solve each one separately real quick, x equals -3, x equals 5. When we check our work, right, let's plug in -3. I'm going to get -3 plus 3 times x, -3, minus 5 equals 0. That works because -3 plus 3 is 0. 0 times -8 is still 0. Right, so when you plug these in, as long as one side equals 0, you're good. So again, it only works when it equals 0. A lot of people try to do this with it equal another number that's not 0. Like, for example, if I did this. A lot of people would try to split it up. And you get, I'll just solve one side of these. And you get x equals 9. But if you actually check the work, and you plug it back in, I'm going to get 11 times 6, which is 66, which doesn't equal 6. Right? It doesn't, the reason it works with 0, because 0 forces the other side to be 0 no matter what it is. So it works. When it doesn't equal 0, it doesn't work. So this is bad. Makes me sad. This is great. So that's how we're going to do this. We're going to solve it using zero product property. And in general, our steps are going to be 1, set equal to 0, 2, factor, and 3, split and solve. I guess I made it 4, but I like it like that. So let's just start with this first one here. Looking for us, so it's already set equal to 0, check. Now we got to factor. Well, it's actually already factored for this also. So all we got to do is split and solve it. So x minus 3 equals 0, x plus 1 equals 0, x equals 3, and x equals -1. You guys check your work. When you plug 3 in, you get 0. 0 times anything equals 0, so it works. Plug in -1, 0. 0 times anything equals 0, so it works. Right, that's why zero product property is so powerful. So the next one here. Alright, so first one set equals 0, done. Then we want to factor. It's actually factor for us already. Let's split it and solve. 4a equals 0, and a plus 2 equals 0. I'll solve this one first. Subtract 2 from both sides. A equals -2. Over here, a lot of people freak out because they say 0. Doesn't matter. Still do the math. Be true. Divide by 4. A equals 0. 0 or anything, still 0. So I have two answers, 0 and -2. And again, if you want to check your work, plug it in. 0 times anything, 0. Let's get to slightly more difficult ones. So one over here. It is set equal to 0. It's step 1. Right? 1 set equal to 0. 2 factor. 3 split and solve. So it's already set equal to 0, but it is not factored. Now if you want you to notice here, there's only two terms. So what I'm going to try to do is factor out a mononomial, what they have in common. And they both have a 6x in common. Divide by 6x, I get 2x minus 3 equals 0. So I set equal to 0, I factor, now it's time to split and solve. 6x equals 0, and 2x minus 3 equals 0. Divide by 6, don't freak out about the 0. You get 0. Plus 3, then divide by 2. And you get x equals 3/2. Again, feel free to check your work, and it should hold. The one right here, right? Ooh, our first one it's not set equal to 0 for us. We gotta do that first. So, right, so step 1, do not forget, super important. I might say the most important step. Set equal to 0. So I gotta move this x over. I'll subtract it from both sides. So I'm gonna get x squared. Remember, you cannot combine these two because one's an x squared, one's an x. So you just put x squared minus x minus 12 equals 0. Now we just have to factor this. Remember, you can factor this any way you want. You can multiply these two things if you want. But really, since there's no number in front, I know it's going to be x and x. I just got to find a combination of -12 that gets me -1. So that would be -4 and 3. So x minus 4, x plus 3. Split and solve. X minus 4 equals 0. x plus 3 equals 0. I get x equals 4, and x equals negative 3. Let's do a few more. So progressively more difficult. So here, 12x squared minus 2x minus 12 equals 0. So again, I want to solve this. It's already set equal to 0 for me, so now I got to factor it. Right, first thing if you notice, since it's an equation, if you notice that they're all divisible by 2, you can make your life easier. Let's divide everything by 2. As long as you do everything, you can be okay. It keeps the sides equal. So I'm going to get 6x squared minus 1x minus 1 equals 0. So that does make it a little easier for us. I still got to factor it, and there's still a number in front, so it's still kind of terrible. So I'm going to get negative 6x squared. Find the combination, get to the middle. So that'll be negative 3x and positive 2x. I need two things that multiply to get 6, but add to get negative 1. Now, since there's a number in front, I will sub these in for the middle term. So I get this. 6x squared minus 3x plus 2x minus 1 equals 0. I'm going to factor by grouping now. So these have a 3x in common. Just put 2x minus 1. Always bring down the middle sign. These two have nothing in common, so you pull out the 1 always. There's always a 1 you pull out. Hey, these guys match. 2x minus 1 and 3x plus 1 equals 0. Split and solve. And you're going to get x equals 1/2 and x equals negative 1/3. Again, you can always plug it in and check. I would use this to check personally, but that's the way it goes. Alright, so that one's the same idea as this. Fraction is a little worse because we have a number in front. Let's look at our last one here of this type. So don't forget our steps. Set equal to 0. Step 1. 2 is factor. 3 is split and solve. So notice it's not set equal to 0, so we got to set equal to 0 first. Add 72 to both sides. And I'm going to get 2x squared minus 24x plus 72 equals 0. So, oof, right now it's ugly, right? These numbers are huge. But again, if you notice, these are all even. I can make my life a little easier just by dividing everything by 2. As long as I do it at every single term, it keeps it balanced and we're okay. X squared minus 12x plus 36 equals 0. Now we have to factor it. Lucky for us, there's no number in front, so it's a lot easier. All it's going to be is x. And I need two things to multiply to get 36, but when you add them, you get 12. Negative 12, actually. So negative 6 and negative 6 should work. So I'm going to get x minus 6 equals 0. Split it. It's got to solve one of these. X equals 6. Now, since it happened twice, we actually call this a double root. I'll talk about more of that in the next lesson. That's a double root. And it's called that because you actually have 2 6s as an answer. And we'll talk about this more later, but there's a thing called fundamental term algebra which says the highest power is the number of answers you should have. So we actually have, no, it looks like 1. We actually have 2 answers, 2 6s, because we have x squared, you should have 2 answers. So that's it for solving quadratic equations by factoring. Right? It's all about the steps right here. Set equal to 0. Then we factor it, either factor monomial or trinomial factoring, and split and solve. You can also do squares. Anyway, next thing. Let's simplify this. A little review. Let's simplify this. Some books like to say FOIL. I hate FOIL. We're just going to distribute. So all you do have to do is get that first term there, multiply by each term. So x squared plus 5x. Then we move on to the next term, the negative 30, and multiply by that by each term. And then add up like terms, and you get your simplified, your expanded trinomial. Right, so that's just a quick review. Might be wondering why we're doing this. Well, because this is how, right, we're essentially going backwards now. Let's say this is equal to 0. I want the actual equation. Well, you just distribute. Distribute the 2, so 4x squared minus 6x. Distribute the negative 5 to both, so negative 10x plus 15 equals 0. And then we just add up like terms. And that's my equation, right? So this is kind of going backwards. If I give it to this form, how do I write it in like expanded form? equation. You just distribute it out. Now we're going to go a step back from that. What if I just gave you solutions? I'm like, hey, here's my answers. My answers are x equals 5 and negative 8. Can I make an equation out of it? Well, yeah, we can. All we have to do is go backwards. Look back to what we did above. My answers here are 1/2, and that's probably not the best example. Let me go a little easier. Here we go. Right, my answers are x equals 4 and x minus equals negative 3. In the equation, all you do is do the opposite. So x minus 4, my answer was x equals 4. X equals negative 3, I put in a form x plus 3. So that's what we're going to do down here. The general form, if you want to write a solution, let's say my solutions are a and b, as a factored form, all you do is do x minus a, x minus b. Alright, you get your answers and you put them in x minus form. So let's do that here. So I'm going to have x minus negative 8 and x minus 5. I want the equation in standard form, so I'm going to set equal to 0. And all I got to do is simplify a little bit. And then since I want it in standard form, I got to distribute this out. So I'm going to get x squared minus 5x plus 8x minus 40 equals 0. Add up like terms, x squared plus 3x minus 40 equals 0. Alright, so that's my equation in standard form. So if I give you solutions, if I give you the answers, the way you write an equation in standard form is just write them the opposite. So it's, you have x minus 8, so you write it as x plus 8. So you have x equals negative 8, so you write it as x plus 8. You have x equals 5, so you write it as x minus 5. Then you just distribute. Simplify it and you're done. So let's try that one more time with the fraction to make it a little bit tougher. Okay, so here are my roots. My roots, my zeros, my solutions, all mean the same thing. So all I can do is rewrite it as x plus 1/3. Rewrite that one as x minus 6 equals 0. Then we'll distribute it. So multiply that x by each term on the other side. Multiply that 1/3 by each term on the other side. That's negative 6 over 3, it's just 2, equals 0. And you might be like, oh, I'm done, I want to add these two. Well, if you notice, generally I give you problems, I don't have fractions. So I don't want fractions here. There's an easy way to get rid of the fraction, though. All we have to do to get rid of the fraction is we multiply both sides by the lowest common denominator. Or the lowest common multiple, I should say. In this case, it's just 3. So we'll multiply both sides by 3. So we get rid of the fraction. So if you do this, I get 3x squared minus 18x plus x, right? Because 3 times 1/3 minus 6 equals 3 times 0 is 0. Now I can add like terms, and I get 3x squared minus 17x minus 6 equals 0. Right? Isn't that so much nicer without a fraction? So that's how you get rid of fractions. If I have to do one of these with a fraction, you just do like normal, and then we get down to some piece like here. Just multiply by whatever the most highest denominator is, those common multiple is. And you get rid of those fractions, then you can just add like terms. So that's how you write an equation in standard form. Let's do a couple application problems to finish up this lesson. First one here, let's find x in the dimensions of each rectangle. So here's this rectangle. Notice how they give us the length and the width. And they give us the area. So if we know how to find area, which is just length times width, we should be able to solve this problem. So my area here is 96. My length is actually my which one's which is x plus 2. My width is x minus 2. Now remember, I gotta solve this. You cannot split it. Remember, if we're gonna solve a quadratic, you have to 1 set equal to 0, 2 factor, and then I could split. So when we're trying to solve this, I got to first set equal to 0. I would actually first expand this, but same idea. 96 equals x squared plus 2x minus 2x minus 4, or 96 equals x squared minus 4. Let's set equal to 0. Minus 96 minus 96. 0 equals x squared minus 100. Now I could factor this. It's a difference of 2 squares, so I get x minus 10. X plus 10 equals 0. Now I can split and solve. X equals 10 and negative 10. Now, quick thing though, find x in the dimensions of each rectangle. So here's my x, but they also want me from the dimensions of each rectangle. So if I plug it in, let's have to plug it in. So my length is going to be 10 plus 2, so 12. My width is going to be 10 minus 2, so 8. So it's a 12 by 8. So I use a 10 on that one. If I use a negative 10, look what happens. I get negative 8. I can't have a negative length. So that one actually doesn't work at all. So I can't have a negative length of a rectangle. So my answer is only x is 10, and my length and width are, my dimensions are 12 by 8, or 8 by 12. Now you might have been wondering, why did I just set up solve for x? Actually, you could have in this case. So if you wanted to, in this problem right here, at this step, you could also just solve for x. Out of the 4 over, instead you got 100 equals x squared. Square root it, and you get x equals plus or minus 10. And likewise, negative 10 doesn't make sense in this context, so x equals 10. Alright, so you can actually solve it both ways. I'll try and do it by factoring. Our last problem. So here's a real world example or an application problem. Track and field. The height of a javelin in feet is modeled by this equation right there. So h of t, which is our height, negative 6t squared plus 79t plus 5, where t is time in seconds that the javelin is thrown. How long is it in the air? So let's see what's going on here, right? Someone throwing a javelin. And then it's in the air until it reaches the ground. The question here is asking, how long is it in the air? So we're trying to figure out what t is, right? Not h of t. Right, those are my two choices. How long is it in the air? That was a time measurement. So this is the one we're looking for. And I need to know what the height, I need to figure out what the height is. What am I setting this equal to? And let's look at the question again. How long is it in the air? So that implies, right, from when I start to when it hits the ground. So we got to ask ourselves, how tall is the ground? And since it's the ground, we consider it 0. So we're gonna set our equation equal to 0, because that's when it hits the ground after it's been in the air for so long. So we're gonna get our equation here. H of t equals negative 16t squared plus 79t plus 5. We're gonna set equal to 0. So I'm gonna get negative 16t squared plus 79t. My plus and my t's look exactly like I'm sorry. So I gotta solve this. Remember what we solved? We set equal to 0. We factor. And we split and solve. So first I gotta set equal to 0. Now, it's a personal thing. I don't like having my x squares being negative. It's a thing I have. So I move it over. Let's move everything over there. I want my things to be positive. So I'm gonna add 16t to both sides. I'm gonna get 16t squared minus 79t minus 5 equals 0. Again, I don't like having a negative leading coefficient, so I just move them all over. So added that to both sides, got this. Subtracted 79 from both sides, subtracted 5 from both sides. So it makes me so much better. Now I gotta factor this. Now they have nothing in common, so I can't just divide everything by the same number because they have no common denominator. So what I'm doing instead is just do what we always do, multiply the two ends. Negative 5 times 16 is negative 80t squared. I gotta find two things that multiply to get negative 80, but add to get negative 79. That's not too bad. It's negative 80t plus 1t. Right? Negative 80 times 1 is negative 80. When you add them up, you get negative 79. So let's sub that in for the middle term right there. So I'm going to get this. 16t squared minus 80t plus 1t minus 5 equals 0. Then we're going to factor by grouping. These have an 8 in common, probably a 16 in common actually. That divided by that, I'm guessing it's going to be 5. So that's going to be t minus 80 divided by 16 is 5. Always bring down the middle term. T and negative 5 have nothing in common, so we always pull out a 1. And you get t minus 5 equals 0. Hey, these match. So I get t minus 5 times 16t plus 1 equals 0. Let's split and solve. t minus 5 equals 0. 16t plus 1 equals 0. So I get t equals 5 seconds. And t, let's subtract 1. T equals negative 1 over 16. Now, just like before, we talked about the size of a rectangle. It made no sense being negative. Same thing here. We're talking about time. I can't have negative time. It's not Doc Brown. So our time is going to be 5 seconds. That's how long the javelin's in the air for. And that's this lesson.